I've been using the iPhone 15 Pro for 3 weeks now, and the number one question I get about the cameras on this thing is this: is the iPhone 15 Pro good enough to take professional looking product photos? By the end of this video, you'll have the answer to that. But arguably the more important question is this: is the iPhone 15 Pro good enough to get paying product photography clients? For those new here, my name is Chris Pieta. I teach photography, but I mainly focus on the business side of things for creatives. Today, we're going to see if this phone is good enough to do a client project and get paid for it. The test we're doing is pretty standard for product photography. We're going to take a white background photo, a photo on a colored backdrop, a styled scene, and an action photo to wrap things up. I'm going to jump into the actual shoot in just a second here, but the fact that I'm even making this video is pretty wild. When I started my product photography business, I wouldn't believe that phone cameras could get this good this fast. The iPhone 15 Pro has a 48 megapixel main camera, 12 megapixel wide angle, and 12 megapixel 3x zoom. The Pro Max has a 5x zoom, which is insane. All three of these can shoot RAW, which is what we want as product photographers. We need a lot of control of the final edit. The main camera has the best dynamic range and captures the most data out of these three, so this is the one I want to really use for this shoot for the most part. This allows for the most flexibility in the edit. But the downside here is that it's a 24mm focal length, which is never used for product photography. Ideally, we want a 50mm or so focal length, and to do this, we can use a 2x zoom on that main lens. But if we want to use that focal length on this camera, we're losing a lot of megapixels. We can only shoot at 12 megapixels rather than 48 megapixels, so that means we need to frame the image perfectly because there's not much room for cropping. Arguably, the biggest feature of this phone is USB-C. This enables you to tether your phone to your computer using software like Capture One. Being a product photographer, I almost always shoot tethered. I need to be able to quickly look at the images I shot. I inspect them and make sure everything is good to go. And then I quickly rate the photo, so my workflow is that much easier when I'm actually editing. For this video, I'm going to be shooting tethered into Capture One. Since we're still trying to answer the question of whether the iPhone 15 Pro is good enough for professional product photography and landing paying clients, I'm not actually working with a paying client for this shoot. We still need to figure out if that's even possible. At the start of this video, I outlined a basic product photography package. We're doing a white background shot, styled scene, colored backdrop shot, and action photo. I still haven't mentioned what product we're actually photographing today. I picked up this non-alcoholic beer and thought the can art looked really cool. This will be a great product to test out since we've got some fun colors to play with. We can definitely get creative with this can. I love shooting beverages since we can get some really cool action shots, and at the end of this video, I'll be trying to get an action shot of me pouring this into a pint glass, so stay tuned for that. All right, let's get the studio set up and start with that white background shot. It's actually pretty good. Don't worry, it's non-alcoholic. All right, so that white background photo. White background shots are important because anyone selling products online needs white background photos. Almost every brand I've worked with has had some sort of online presence, so everyone needs these photos. I'm going to actually opt for a more modern white background shot. We're not going to be having a pure white background like a lot of the stuff you see. The final image will actually be off-white. And we're also going to be using harsh light for this rather than soft light. I'm after that harsh shadow on the backdrop to get that modern look. For this setup, we're using a very simple one light setup. The light is up and 45 degrees away from the product. Super standard lighting setup for white background shots like this. If you need help with lighting, I have a bunch of videos on my channel that break down a bunch of different lighting strategies. Go check those out. While we're on the topic of lighting, I need to bring up the single biggest issue with this phone for product photographers. Whenever I shoot products for clients on my main Sony camera, I use a flash. Flash is the go-to lighting method for most product photographers. iPhones can't sync to a flash, so we can't use one. Flashes are great because they're way more powerful than continuous lights. For this shoot, I'm using the Aperture 300D, which is an extremely powerful light, but it's still nowhere near as powerful as a professional flash. So for this white background shot, I'm using the 2x lens on this iPhone, and that gets pretty close to the lens equivalent I shoot on for most of my product photography shoots. White background shots like this are really simple. We need to make sure our product is clean and centered. The first photo I shot here, I'm pretty happy with, and after a quick Lightroom edit, I corrected the white balance, brought out some of the shadows, and gave it some contrast. I wasn't stoked about this photo and it looks kind of plain, so I added some secret sauce. Spraying cans with water or a 50-50 water glycerin mixture is a great way to easily enhance your photos. This automatically makes your drink look cold, and it adds some unique texture and just makes it stand out a little bit more from the crowd. I like this photo of the can covered in water droplets a lot more than just that plain can. Let me know which one you prefer in the comments. Now, for the colored backdrop. I'm using a yellow backdrop here, but the can has these orange bluish tones to it. I want to see how well we can turn these yellows on the backdrop into the can's orange hue inside of Lightroom. We'll be testing the editing flexibility of these raw files here. Again, we're shooting everything in RAW here, so we have better editing capabilities. I'm stacking two cans against each other here just to make the shot a bit more interesting. Both have been sprayed with water. Once again, I'm using the same exact lens as before, the 2x main camera. This is my favorite lens to use because I love the focal length of this for product photography. After a quick Lightroom edit, I'm actually really liking how this one turned out. We adjusted the yellow paper just a little bit here and gave it that yellow-orange look to better match the can. Again, we're using harsh light and we can really see how nice that looks against those water droplets. Harsh light gives your product photos a lot more contrast, so whenever you use water droplets on your product, harsh light is going to be your best friend here. I'm pretty happy with this photo, but it feels a little off. I can tell that it wasn't taken with a professional camera just because I've seen so many professional photos in my life. But I'm not sure if most people will be able to tell a difference, honestly. I bet if I was scrolling past this on Instagram or social media, I don't know if I'd be able to tell a difference. Okay, so we got that white background shot, we got that colored paper shot. Let's get a bit more creative. I want to get a close-up of these cans in some ice. I've got some fake ice in the studio here that I'm going to be using for this next photo. I'm grabbing one main can to have as my subject, and I want to add some background elements too. So I'm grabbing two more cans, spraying them with water, and putting them in the background here to add some depth to this image. The goal here is going to be to get some background blur with these two cans while having this main can as a subject. Let's see what we can do. Right away, this is my favorite photo of the day so far. I actually love the detail that the 3x telephoto captured here. The background separation is quite nice too. Adding these two cans in the background definitely helps the scene. The fake ice fills the frame and adds for a more refreshing scene here as well. It's making me want an ice cold brew. Luckily, I've got this thing here still. Good stuff. I'm actually quite impressed with the dynamic range of this photo. This photo is definitely pushing the camera's limits here because I even moved the light source a bit to the side. We can see the whole right side is super bright and the left has some more shadow on it. The ice here is really bright, but it's still not overblown. And the detail in the water droplets is super nice here. You can see all the individual droplets, and I'm actually surprised at how good this one turned out. All right, let's really push the camera to its limits here and try and get an action photo done. The idea here was to get a close-up of me pouring the beer into a pint glass. There were two things I was worried about here: shooting speed and focus. Since I wanted to get an up-close pouring shot, I had to focus on either the can or the stream of liquid coming out of the can. These were not on the same focal plane, so I had to compromise here. I knew that one would end up slightly out of focus. What I did was lock the focus on the can since it's more important to be able to read the brand name in these types of shots. Let's have a look at this photo. As you can see, we actually capture the action shot really well here. We've got the can in focus, the beer being poured, and even some foam bubbles came through. Now the dynamic range here was really put to the test, and you can see some of the foam bubbles, they're a little blown out, but you really need a pixel peep to even see that. I mentioned this was taken with a 3x zoom, so the final photo was only 12 megapixels. I had very little room to crop here, so the bubbles aren't super sharp. The biggest problem I actually faced here was the shooting speed of the phone. Since I was shooting RAW, I couldn't burst capture, so I had to just tap the shutter constantly on the phone. I had it set up on the tripod, so that was easy, but this took a bunch of takes to get right. I was really only able to take a photo every 2 seconds or so because it was that slow, and I really struggled with that. I'm used to my Sony a7R IV taking 10 photos a second, so that makes shooting action photos like this so much easier on a big camera like that. Action shots and shooting in RAW are a lot harder on a phone, so that's something to keep in mind if you're going to go this route. All right, now the question you've been waiting for. Are these photos good enough to work with paying clients? Before I answer that, I know a lot of photographers out there struggle to get clients and struggle with low budget clients. I've put together a free 60-minute workshop that walks you through my 4-step blueprint to landing clients, breaks down my pricing formula to charge thousands, and I even reveal my scaling framework. You can get instant access to that workshop for free with the link in the description below. Secure your spot today. Is the iPhone 15 Pro good enough to work with paying clients? Kind of. The photos I've shown you today are a lot better than what a lot of brands have on their social media pages, so you can definitely charge for these types of photos and this content. If you're just starting out and you don't have a main camera to shoot on, you can 100% land a client using that framework that I teach in that free workshop I just mentioned. All you need is your phone and a light and some backdrops, and that's it. But here's the thing, clients don't want you shooting on an iPhone. There's still this weird stigma around this sort of thing. If you say you're shooting on a phone, your perceived value automatically goes down. The client thinks your work is worth way less immediately. Now, I'm not here to argue if this is right or wrong. I'm just saying that's the reality right now. That's what's gonna happen. Your perceived value will go down. The client, they have the same phone in their pocket. They're not gonna want to pay you thousands to do something that their own phone can do. Now, I know this thought process from the client's end is wrong because they're paying you for the skills, not the gear. But that's the stigma that we're currently dealing with. It's the reality. And as a creative business owner, I think realistically. So if your perceived value goes down, what can you do? One route you can go down is just never tell your client what gear you shoot on. I've worked with over 50 companies inside my product photography business, and only 1 or 2 have ever asked me about my gear. And this is an okay idea, but it can backfire. Once a client asks you what gear you shoot on, you have to tell them that it's a phone. You can't lie to a client. So you can take my free workshop, learn the process, land a client, and once you get paid, reinvest that into a proper camera. That's what I recommend you do if you don't have a camera right now. Build up a portfolio with just your phone, pitch to clients using my 4-step blueprint, get paid, and then reinvest into a proper camera. The iPhone 15 Pro is good enough to get your foot in the door in the product photography business, but it's not good enough to run a sustainable business long term. If you don't have any clients yet, secure your spot in my free workshop in the description. And thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.